RWBY Chibi episode 12. Now I gotta say I really enjoyed this episode. It seems like they're really jumping into the idea of, longer skits with bigger payoffs. And I thought this was a cool episode. Honestly, I actually liked the first skit more than I enjoyed the second one, but I don't know if it was because it was a combination of the fact that we finally got to see Sun and Neptune, but it was also probably the best way they could possibly do it, because I didn't even think about the junior detective thing, like that being, part of the show, but it makes perfect sense that them doing that. It kind of made me wish that they just make a whole thing about them doing the junior detective thing, because I love that. It was super freaking funny to me. It was kind of like the first episode when RWBY was yelling filth. Like, the littering thing made me laugh so hard. But they put on the mustaches and stuff, and they messed with John, and they beat him up too. They actually beat him up, which I thought made it even funnier. But it was really cool. And oddly enough, because I actually counted the time, I think it's only like 40 seconds long. It's 40 seconds, and then the rest of the episode is the Little Red Riding Hood thing. And I still enjoyed that, but like that littering thing, it just made me laugh because I didn't expect him to just yell it like that. So that made me laugh like crazy. And then they beat him up, and they're messing with him, and they have the little mustaches, and the subtitles make it funny too, because they call Sun Officer Abs, and then Neptune is just Officer Nep. But that made it even funnier because apparently they've been doing that since the beginning, and I didn't realize that. I never really bothered to check on it, but I did for this one, and it was really funny. But I really loved the first skit. The second one made me laugh right off the top when it was like it's an original screenplay, and then it was like Little Red Riding Hood. So that in itself made me laugh. And they go through it, and Yang's doing like a million puns a minute, and she when she first does it and she dances off the stage, you can see that she's still kicking, but she technically floats off of the stage, which I thought was funny. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but that just made it funnier to me. And they go through this stuff, and it's just a bunch of random things going wrong or just being really weird. And for whatever reason, as Blake pointed out, why is she flying as the wolf? And RWBY was a little bit racist, saying that she was part animal, so that's why she was in that role. And it was just going through it, I thought it was funny. They had I think probably my favorite line, oddly enough, was when Ozpin is saying the wolf just had to get Little Red Riding Hood to come closer, and Blake's just like, hey, come closer. For some reason, that was my favorite part out of that whole thing, but it definitely made me laugh. I feel like they changed Zwei's animation just a little bit. I think they did it a tiny bit to make him even cuter in this, because I feel like he looks skinnier to me than he did in the other versions, because in the other episodes he looked actually a bit closer to what he did in the normal series. And I don't know, maybe if I'm just noticing stuff a little bit differently, but he's in the thumbnail of this episode as well as an earlier episode, and as soon as I saw the thumbnail for this one, I was like, he looks different. So I don't think it's just me. I think he actually does look legitimately different in this episode, and maybe it was like that in the last one as well, but I don't really think it was, the last one that he was in. So I don't really think it was, so I guess they decided to maybe change it up a little bit and make him just even a little bit cuter, because he seems like he's smaller too, actually. It seems like that's kind of a part of it, make him a little bit smaller, and it's just it's the overall aesthetic of him, because it seems like he's a bit more, he's even more chibi-like than he was before, because it seemed like he had more detail to me, and they made him a bit more chibi-like in this episode, which is not bad. It still looks fine. I was just kind of surprised. I was like, I can actually tell, like I said, even when I first saw the thumbnail, I was like, he looks different from that. So I'm totally fine with that. It didn't bother me or anything. It was just something that I noticed. But I love what they did with Zwei, of course, and him just being super cute, and for whatever reason, he's the stagehand, and he kicks for the scene change. I don't know if that was him that dropped the bed. That just came out of nowhere. And then he's carrying Blake, who is petrified on top of him, so I could understand how he might be able to carry her, because she would just freeze in place, I guess. But he dumps her, and then he's and then he shakes his head yep, that's exactly how that's supposed to be. So I love that moment as well. I thought it was pretty funny. And not only do we hear Ozpin, but we get, I always forget his name. I always remember Blake, but I can't remember Professor Port. There it is. So we actually hear his voice as well, which I thought was pretty cool. We didn't get to see either of them, which kind of sucked. Because that was, with it being the Chibi version, you kind of want to see all the characters. But we did get two, and we got to hear two others, which doesn't really mean anything. But I hope that means we'll get to see him sooner rather than later. But I thought it was funny, and I don't know why Weiss would have to use his weapon anyway during the screenplay. Like, why couldn't she just use hers? But lots of random silly stuff going on, and Yang saying that Red Riding Hood was a Mary Sue and stuff like that. I thought was pretty funny. But I enjoyed this episode. I really, like I said, I like the first skit better than I like the second one. But with it being a longer one, I think that might be why, because there were parts in between where I was like, oh, well, I didn't like that. And like I said, the first skit is seriously only 40 seconds, which means it's like 5 minutes, almost 5 minutes if you count like the little intros and outros. It's about 5 minutes of just this one skit. So there's a lot in between the parts that I really enjoyed. So I think that's why I like the first skit a little bit more, because it just made me laugh really hard, especially the littering thing. For some reason, when people yell stuff in this show, it makes me laugh. I don't know why, but it also leads to really funny consequences. So I enjoyed both of them, but personally, it was the first one. And plus, it has Sun and Neptune in it, so that was cool to finally get to see them in their chibi version. We may or may not ever get to see the rest of their team. It took forever for us to finally see them in action in the most recent volume, even though they're technically in the last volume. There's like that one opening scene, or like there's like a big aerial shot, and the whole team's over there, but only Sun and Neptune come over to talk to the rest of the characters. And like, I thought we were gonna get to meet them, and then we still had to wait until the next volume. But maybe we'll get to see the rest of the team in Chibi version. I'm sure we won't see them anytime soon, because they'll go through the characters that have actually had the spotlight. So we'll probably get, I would assume that professors would be the most likely candidates, to be introduced next, and maybe Team Cardinal, just because they were, in the show so early on. But that's really all I can think of. Like, that team, the adults, and maybe Team Coffee, depending on how they, do that. But either way, I'm looking forward to what we get. Because they really went, especially with this episode, they really went the route of a longer skit compared to, shorter skits. Because we've had, like, it'll be 2 long skits or 3 medium-sized skits, and this was, like I said, 40 seconds, and then basically 5 full minutes of one skit. And is the specific skit itself, I mean, maybe if it was something different, I probably could have enjoyed it a bit more. But I still like the idea more of multiple skits rather than the really long ones, because with episodes being so short, I like seeing them expand. And I've asked this question several times, because it seems like they've really decided to go this route where they'll do, longer skits. And I would prefer it if we do get at least 3 per episode. I wouldn't want, especially like this one, because it wasn't even half and half. It was, half, less than a minute, and then basically 5 full minutes. So if they're going to do 2, I would personally prefer both to be even, rather than one really short and then one really long one. But I would love to know your preference on that and how you guys feel about this episode, because they really went, basically it was one long skit if you really think about it, because it was about 40 seconds or so, and then the entire play of Little Red Riding Hood. So I would love to know what you guys thought about that idea, or if you would prefer it to be shorter, because I felt like it was a little too long, just because of the fact that it was only 2 skits, and the first one was so short, which is obvious to tell as you go through it. And I'm so used to seeing all, when they do the transitions with the characters, and like, when Ruby comes in, they have like the pedals and stuff like that, and then Jean comes in and he trips and all that stuff. I'm used to seeing that multiple times. It's like, man, that's really weird to only see that once in an episode. It actually surprised me a little bit. It's like, it seems so weird not to have that at least twice, in the show. So it really surprised me going through it like that. I was like, that's interesting. But for me personally, I would prefer, if they're going to stick with the longer skits, which it seems like that's definitely what they're going to be doing, I would at least prefer that they do 3 smaller skits, or at least, like I said, 2, perfectly even skits, or at least, close to even, as far as time-wise. Just because sometimes the longer payoff might not exactly do the trick, and it might not be worth the payoff, depending on what it is. It can have funny moments in between and stuff like that. So it really depends on the skit, because it could be something else, and I could laugh the entire 5 minutes. So it kind of depends on what the skit is, but I'd still rather see like 3 things instead of just 2 things, especially if they're going to be uneven. But I would love to know what you guys think about that idea. And of course, I want to know what you guys thought about this episode in general. So please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts. And like I said, I would definitely like to know what you guys think about, kind of how they played it with this episode, having one really, really long skit and then one nice, little short little clip there. And of course, I would have to ask this, but would you guys be interested in seeing more junior detective stuff? Because I don't know, they can't obviously mess with Jean. They probably could, because that's his role in the series. They could mess with him the whole time, but I'd love to see them just do a bunch of silly stuff like with other characters, or just even if they bring back like the shadow characters and stuff, that'll be fine too. But I would love to know what you guys think about the skit size and of course the episode in general. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.